Now I request Sri B.L. Chandak to formally introduce the guest.
Yeah, thank you, Pavanji. Let me first introduce Kolkata Investor Group. This is in existence for last 7-8 years. This consists of people who have deep interest in investments. In pandemic time, we started Zoom meetings. So over last 1.5 years, we have invited almost 100 guests plus. And today our guest is Anil Narang. He is founder of Sustainable Growth Partners, which invest in US equity and Indian equity. He was earlier executive director with Morgan Stanley India and co-chief executive officer of Salomon Brothers in New York City. He has attended over 20 Berkshire Hathaway Annual Meetings. In fact, my introduction to him happened on 16 December 2010 through Sandeep Kothari for attending Berkshire Hathaway meeting, and I attended in 2011. And after that, he also helped a lot of millennium memes who are attending program today to attend Berkshire Hathaway meetings in 2012 and 2018. Anil is independent investment committee and board member of Enam Asset Management offshore entity. He has contributed numerously in various forums in India and USA, including on Bombay Stock Exchange Index Committee. Anil is also vegan ambassador and has presented and written on that subject several times in several places, including participating in EV League Vegan Conference at Harvard University. We also have special guest Deepak Parekh today, and he hosted Anil Parekh's this program, Wisdom of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and also on vegan lifestyle in SDFC boardroom on 24th of July 2015. And I had the privilege of attending the program, courtesy his approval. So thank you, Deepak ji. And now we can request Anil to start on both the subjects. Maybe he can start with wisdom of Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, and then we can have short 15-20 minutes question answer. After that, he can speak on vegan diet, how it helps in COVID time and beyond. And then remaining time can be utilized for both the subjects. And we'll close this in 1.5 hours. So in India time, 7 o'clock, we'll close the program. Over to Anil.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chandak, Kolkata Investors Group, Deepak Parekh ji. Pleasure to be back with some of you. I will first start with the wisdom of Buffett and Munger. I have attended maybe 25 of those events, and in the last physical meeting before the pandemic in 2019, there were maybe over 40,000 people. And it's a very unique setup. There's no PowerPoints, just question and answer, and a lot of the wisdom just comes out. And there are so many people who come from all over the world. And I was talking to some other attendees, and they said, this looks like a cult. But somebody else said, yeah, but this is a happy and rich cult. So, but more importantly, I think I have been most touched and impressed with the general wisdom about life. Business, I think, and investing is just a fallout from their extraordinary, great qualities of integrity, patience, wisdom, multidisciplinary thinking, learnability, charitableness, and I'm going to use the word some sort of spirituality, perhaps indirectly. And because you don't get to that kind of wealth and charitableness just by being smart. In fact, Buffett's net worth may be 100 billion, but in my mind, it's closer to 200, because he's given away 40 billion to Gates Foundation. And if he had kept it, it would have grown to another 100 billion. So it is a little bit mind-boggling. And he and Munger just started as two individuals, 50, 60 years back in a room with no capital or assets, and just grew it. So that's why I've titled this presentation, General Wisdom About Life. And you will hear about those different aspects during the presentation. Some interesting, small, but very important points. He mentioned in one of the meetings, he never tells his driver he's late. So what he was trying to say is you make mistakes only when you're trying to rush. And that's also in investing. You say this year I must get 25% and you try harder, you actually make a mistake and maybe go negative. He has focused on a lot of the importance of family, like with children, there is no rewind button. Marriage is by far the most important decision of your life. In one meeting, he said it 5 times and somebody I know was influenced by that. He said his most powerful force in life has been the unconditional love of his father, and that's what he gives to people who come across him. One amazing qualities of Munger and Buffett are they completely logically and rationally avoid envy, greed, anger, regret. They are like swamis in that respect. And that is one of the amazing parts about them. So like, for example, Munger went through a lot of issues earlier in his life, from losing one son to some disease. One routine eye surgery botched up his one eye, but he goes on. He says, so what if you have negatives? You just need to rise once more, then you fail, and you will keep going on. They have a lattice work of mental models. So they cut across different disciplines, including physics, biology, psychology, math, statistics, and they keep reading and reading. I mean, in each of these subjects and more, one could spend an hour talking about it. But just as an example, in biology, for example, if you see a rabbit, you know it has evolved, it works. So that's why typically they don't go after new startups because they don't know if it will work or not, and then they are not hesitant to put in a big amount. And they keep reading a lot. I have increased my reading quite a bit, more through when I walk or drive through different apps of Amazon, and it really expands your mind. Another example I want to give you is like physics. If you take a ball of steel, which is hollow on the inside, if you put oil inside, and there's a certain amount, but if you double the amount of the steel, the amount of oil goes up by a much higher factor. So that what he was trying to say is, counterintuitively, larger companies, if they have sound, sustainable outlook and practices, grow disproportionately. Oil is like the profits, steel is like the capital. Some of the criteria they look for when they invest, and there's a lot of subjectivity, you really can't put it in a computer program, but I would use the word sustainable growth is a criteria. Sustainable growth means it's long-term, predictable, maybe minimum 10 years out, which is very, very difficult, and very, very few companies match that. And some of the characteristics of such companies are strong brand customer loyalty, long history of return on equity over 15%, although temporary problems may present opportunities. They have highly cash generative businesses, shareholder oriented management, and conservative finance structure. Risk management. So they have sound qualitative criteria. They do not rely at all on quantitative models. Risk is not defined as likelihood of loss of as volatility or Sharpe ratios. It is defined as the likelihood of loss of capital on a permanent basis rather than a function of past volatility. In fact, in one meeting, he said, if you are in a presentation where the fund manager is talking about risk, and if he uses the word standard deviation or Sharpe ratios, quickly zip up your wallet and walk out. So they prevent short-term orientation in many ways. For example, when he had a fund before he started Berkshire, he reported results, believe it or not, just once a year. Later on, he switched to 6 months and said he was very concerned about short-term thinking. Most importantly, it has been highlighted as sound, balanced temperament is the key. They really do not have excess greed or fear. So one can hear them a lot, one can digest it, but the temperament is something you have to evolve on your own. Maybe you hear it and practice it. And the other great quality they have is the best decision at time is to do nothing. In fact, in 1 year, I think he made some poor investment. He said it'd be better off going to the movies that year. And they wait for the fat pitch. Just because the market is open doesn't mean you swing your bat. And there's no stock price target. And here's another wisdom, which is, it is the strong swimmers who drown. So if you're a strong swimmer, let's say you're a very sharp and good trader, you may keep making money, but it's like crossing the English Channel. You cross it 12th time and 13th time you sink. So Buffett crosses a pool, that too when the water is shallow. The other thing about the investment wisdom is they price rather than time investments. And this is a little bit counterintuitive and it takes a long time to understand. They never factor in macroeconomics, very interestingly. I will request Mr. Chandak to play a short 1.5 minute video of Buffett and Munger on this subject.
Yeah, sure.
The way the global economy is changing, what sectors interest you? Where do you see interesting change where somebody brings you a company in that sector you're interested in?
Well, Larry came and talked to me a few months ago and said he'd really like to join Berkshire Hathaway. And I understood enough about auto dealerships and particularly his operation to think that that's a good business for Berkshire to be in for the next 50 years. You know, going to planes and trains. I mean, the same thing happened with the Burlington Northern Santa Fe 6 or 7 years ago. We look at opportunities as they come along, and we try to figure out whether we can understand the long-term economic prospects of the business. A lot of times the answer is no. Then we forget it. But we're not making any judgment about where the market's going, or we're not looking at any macro factors. My partner, Charlie Munger, and I have been working together now 55 years. We've talked about every business you can imagine and stocks. We have never had one decision that involved a macro factor. It just doesn't come up. I mean, if I talk to Charlie about the Alta Link, which is something we're going to buy up in Alberta, or just anything, we don't get into macro. You know, it just doesn't make any difference. We do decide whether we think we know where that business will be in 10 years or 20 years, and we know what we'll pay in terms of valuation. But we really don't care whether the Fed is going to increase interest rates 100 basis points or 200 basis points next week.
It's like a dagger in my heart, Warren. But let me ask you about...
Great, thanks. And the reason is that actually Munger is an economist and a psychology professor at the same time, besides being an investor. He basically says that macroeconomics have very complex interactions, the different factors. It's very hard to predict how things will fall out. Forget stock market, even interest rates are very difficult to predict. Most of them are wrong, even in the direction. So they just look at micros. If it's at a good price and the company is predictable, you go in. You don't know whether you'll make money in 1 week, 1 year, or even longer, but it usually works out if you have the temperament, liquidity, and the patience. So that's a very key point I like to highlight. You know, because people ask me, is this the right time to invest? Will the market tank sometime? But you have to keep, I think, that factor in mind, that it's at a good price at this time with long-term sustainable predictableness. And the other big thing is they really go out of the way to try to avoid big mistakes. In fact, they say if you just avoid the big mistakes in investing, for that matter in life, you have kind of got it made. So there's a book, and this is actually the title of the book. It's not a sentence I'm reading. It says, tell me where I'll die, I'll never go there. It's on Charlie Munger. And in fact, at a meeting once, he was asked about this. He actually raised up the topic of India. He said somebody asked him to give wisdom about India. He'll first try to figure out what are the 1 or 2, 3 things that can dramatically negatively impact it, and not just in business. It could be political, it could be war, and just play the role in trying to avoid it. So there's a phrase of Munger called invert, invert, invert. He always tries to see what may go wrong. Back in the 60s, they had already, I don't know how, figured out a lot of the fundamentals and stuck to it. Like it's their quote that in the short term, market is a popularity concept. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. And even then, Buffett had mentioned that most mutual funds and investors may be conventional, not conservative, and subject to groupthink. So if the market is down 10, they are down 5, they pat themselves on the back. But maybe the good thing I have to do is leave some in cash, or not worry about too much about index comparison. In 3-4 years back, actually, he also pointed out if he had invested in the Dow in the beginning of the last century, it was 66. It ended the last century 11,500, and none of the world wars, the depression, the recessions, the oil shocks, the flu pandemic, resignation of presidents mattered. If you try to time in and out, you probably came out a lot less. And now here's an interesting phrase which I've heard only from them. I never hear it with any investor's presentation. Munger was one asked if investing in some sort of a healthcare company, which was not the best, could give disproportionate returns with some risk. And he used the sentence that they have a moral responsibility to be rational. So they want to make money, show that one can be moral, ethical, and yet do very well, not just with some bets which may or may not work out. And the other thing is their own company, Berkshire Hathaway, unlike many company management, they actually don't want it to go up too much beyond its intrinsic value as they feel it is, or too low, because then investors can be hurt. They actually wish it trades in a narrow range centered around the intrinsic business value. So they never give out the intrinsic business value, but some of the actions and indirect statements you can catch on. Like, in July 2018, Buffett announced first time that they would be buying his shares back, provided there was a meaningful discount, and he and Munger agreed. And he has continued that. By the way, he even bought at present prices, although it has gone down a little bit from the higher pace earlier in the year. So they also try to focus on economic value. They try to show that in the annual reports and in their meetings, as opposed to accounting, because accounting is just the beginning, not the end of business valuation. And they report to shareholders the way they would like to see if the places were reversed. They have extraordinary fairness. For example, before they started Berkshire, even their pricing for their private limited partnership, you can call it a hedge fund, but they had no management fee, because they strongly felt that investment professionals should not make money if the investor doesn't. They had a profit sharing after hurdle rate, 25% over 4, because 10 years treasuries are 4, or 33 over 6, but that's different. They have also been very much against the private equity business model. They do invest in private equities, entire companies, But the outside companies, they have very high management fees. They have profit sharing. They try to sell companies to then start a new fund when it may or may not make sense. So everything is aligned with what intrinsically at a deep level makes sense. They are super avid readers. So they keep reading and reading. Munger, by the way, is 97. Buffett is 90. And they appeared for the annual meeting early May. And if you watch them both, I couldn't notice any difference even if I go back a few decades. Completely sharp, totally alert, very knowledgeable. That to me was just very impressive, aside from whatever I've said. So I think by them trying to give this value to the world, they are mentally involved. They keep reading, so maybe that keeps their mind and body young. So they keep reading and reading and reading. There's actually dozens and dozens and dozens of books, but I have just picked two just to briefly show. This is a book, Essays of Warren Buffett by Larry Cunningham, and this just describes some of his thoughts on different topics in his own words. The moment any author, including me, we try to phrase Buffett and Munger, there's a lot of value lost. So he's just compiled in his own words, different thing. And here's a book which just shows their wide thinking. It's got nothing to do with business, which is what they do. So it's called Deep Simplicity. It's by a Scottish astrophysicist, John Gribbin, Bringing Order to Chaos and Complexity. So Munger says, basically, before I mentioned briefly about this book, you can read about any subject, you take out one or two key principles, and you can apply it to anything in life, including business or investing. So in this book, actually, it's 300-page plus. There's only maybe 2 lines on investing. It actually says that in nature, in universe, out of complete order, without warning, there's chaos. And more interestingly, out of chaos, there is order again. And underlying all that trend is deeper and deeper simplicity. This applies to planet movements, atomic particles, deer populations, stock markets. So there is some order now. Interestingly, this author, John Gribbin, doesn't ask why, but I wonder if there's some other spiritual hand behind. But anyway, so they have figured out things work. So in 2008, October, when the financial markets were crashing, Buffett bought a big time, and everybody, including many investment professionals over the next few months, said the world's coming to an end. There are decades of 50, 60 years of leverage era is over, and they kept at it. And when in second quarter of 2009, things turned, they asked what happened. They said, well, the Fed and the government did something right. Buffett said he knew they would do something right, he just didn't know what. So he had faith in them. So this is the kind of wisdom. The other thing is, especially Munger, his mind is extraordinarily clear and simple. So he has in his mind 3 inboxes: in, out, and too hard. So if you don't understand or it's too hard, you don't need to do something. So they stick to their circle of competence. You can only know a few companies well. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know about every investment trend, everything, and be very diversified. You'll probably make mistakes. And then if you are really confident, you can go in a big way. And when things go down, because you understand it, and if you're right, you don't sell at the wrong time. The other aspect is they admit mistakes very readily. In fact, in 2015, when I had presented to Deepak Parekh and his top 25 or so executives, Durgesh Shah was with me, and he pointed out that as of then, the word mistake had appeared in 167 times in his last few decades of annual reports. So not too many management do that. And then some people ask me, well, they readily admit mistake because they are so big and powerful and rich. But I have studied them over a long time, and this is the way they started from the beginning. They didn't become big and then change their practices. The other very unusual aspect is they were they do a lot of things in a very efficient way. So they have a web of trust. They have practically no processes. They don't even have an investor relations department. And here's the compounding aspect, which needs to happen in many dimensions of life. And one example of that is, he has mentioned this several times, this is Warren, that he and Charlie over 60 years or so have had disagreements, but never an argument. That's amazing. We know a lot of business partnerships break down because of distrust or just egos, but that's amazing. You may be also surprised. They know each business so well many times. They actually many times make quick decisions. It doesn't take them 5 or 10 minutes of analysis. And sometimes it's just 2 seconds. There are two quick filters. One, do they understand it? Two, is it predictable for at least 10 years? If it doesn't meet that, it's generally out. So the other thing about circle of competence, which I mentioned, is it's good not just to know what you really know, it's also good to know what you don't know. If you don't know it, avoid it. So that's the other thing. And their concept of sustainable growth happens because many companies they have invested in have a wide moat. And that is, even if you know what they are doing, you cannot replicate it. And usually that's also related to a lot of individual global consumer stickiness. Look at his biggest investments today. They're actually well-known companies: Apple, Bank of America, Coca-Cola, American Express. You know what they're doing, especially the non-technology ones, but you can't replicate it. And the moats can be in the form of quality of product, service, cost, culture, capacity to endure and take advantage of volatility, share of mind, real estate locations. I think, and I'm going to speed through the rest just to be cognizant of time. You know, like in banking and mortgage, they go after profitability, not necessarily market share, because the worst mistakes are made in the best of time. This is with banks and mortgage companies. Even their manufacturing companies had a high return on equities. And it's the world's best conglomerate. And there are a lot of aspects which the market may not fully appreciate. There's a lot of synergies between how, because different companies, they can maximize asset liability management, capital allocation, even tax, even though tax is not the reason they're buying it, governance, etc. They're also pretty open-minded, and in conclusion, to show the very sharp, clear thinking of Munger, you know, there at the annual meeting, by the way, there's people of all ages, from children to people in their 90s. So one teenager asked Mr. Munger, what's the best way to succeed? And he said, just deserve it. And that was it. No further comment. So anything you do in relations, in business, if you just deserve it, you will get it. I think now I'll leave 10 minutes or so for question and answer before we go to the next topic. We can come back to more questions at the end if you have time.
Yeah, thanks, Anil. You have given a lot of insights. Now, I have two questions. One is, Warren Buffett is a big fan of market cap and GDP ratio. So if you could elaborate on that metrics, and in the context of India, where market cap is going up and up, where we are. And the second question is, Warren Buffett always buys businesses which are simple, understandable, consistent, track record, and value buys. And these days, there are several new age businesses which are futuristic and are in losses. So is there any guidance to evaluate those businesses out of learnings from Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger?
Yes, very good questions. Market cap to GDP ratio of India is slightly over 100%. The US is maybe double that. One thing is, investing is very complex. And this is just one criteria in my judgment. There are a lot of other criteria, some subjective too. So, you keep that in mind, but don't rely on any one thing. I have read people and books on, stock market related to oil price, related to interest rates, and never works out that simply. So yes, you keep that in mind, you look at it, but the best way to invest, like Warren has bought his Berkshire stock in the last few months too, because he probably feels that it is a good business at the right price. And then you don't worry what may happen. The great thing about great companies like Berkshire or many other companies in the world, including India, is that if you invest in them and the market goes down, they will also go down for sure. Maybe they'll go down less, but there's no guarantee. But usually it's not permanent. You get it back within few months to few years. Whereas less quality, bad companies, they go down permanently. And your second question about new age technology is a very good one. Yes, things are changing, but nevertheless, to the extent one can, try to figure out things that are predictable. I talked about the complexity of macroeconomics, and with technology, it's getting more and more. But and one way to maybe invest in some newer companies is maybe you have a small portion allocated through some basket which is intelligently designed. But look at Buffett's, his market cap as of Friday was in round numbers maybe 640 billion or something, and Apple is maybe 20% of that. That's his super biggest investment. By the way, cash is more than that, so he has allocated even more to cash. The cash has before I go back to Apple, has a two purpose. It provides a cushion against multiple blows and possibility for zooming in if there's a dislocation in the market. But Apple is predictable in his mind. He in February 2020, just before the pandemic hit, he said it's the best company in the world, and it fell, and it is more than doubled since then. So even though it's technology, that's somewhat predictable. So that's the one way to do it. Because, yes, you could have invested in some startup 20 years back, but nobody knew, 20 years back, Amazon would be such a big success. And would you have put in a large amount of your net worth? The answer is probably no. And would you have stuck it out over all these years? So, but there are, of course, different ways to do well, and no one way, but this is probably one of the more reliable ways.
Thank you. Saurabh, you can come. Saurabh, you are mute.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Anil sir. Thank you for taking out your time. Nice to meet you again after 2 years. So my question is regarding long-term competitive advantage. And even in the video, Warren Buffett said that he wants to see the long-term economic model for next 50 years. So I have two questions regarding this. One, how do we identify companies and visualize what they are going to do after 10 years or 50 years? And second, how do we identify entrepreneurs or businessmen who have those capability, like what we saw in even HDFC, right? So what was written in MDA in 2008-9 that came after 10 years. So the thing exactly panned out what was written. Thank you.
Yeah, very good question. I think going out 10 years, you point, I think management is a subjective quality, but that's very, very important. If you can figure out that there's some vision, some executive capability in terms of implementing, in terms of the integrity and governance, it is subjective, but that's very important, because there will be downturns, but they will be able to figure out some ways around it. The other thing to keep in mind is, if you take a great business which is already established, then even if if it really has grown well in a sustainable way, sometimes even the key players may not necessarily be able to make a bad bad decision about it. So you have to balance those two things. But having said all this, I think there's actually very few companies you can predict out 10 years. But the criteria I listed in the beginning of my presentation in terms of competitive power, pricing power, even in bad times, the moat, the castle with a swamp around it, where you know what they're doing, yet you cannot do it. Those are some of the aspects you look for. So should any other question?
Can you please elaborate a little bit about scale economics? How one can identify scale economics? And second thing is with regard to moats. When you say now in the disruptive era in the technology world where things are moving so fast and businesses are changing and getting challenged, so how do you define moat, or how do we evaluate moat in such a competitive technological landscape?
Right. I mentioned about management, for example, let's take, let's take Berkshire. It was not in new companies, but it went into Apple. And that was not that far back. It was not like he got in a big way 10 years back. And then, then closer to India, you can see like a great company like HDFC and HDFC Bank. HDFC Bank went into implementing technology where they said we can disrupt ourselves and have a consumer-friendly experience. So management is also important. And I think I pointed out that the moat can be in different forms, and not just it can be in processes, in reputation, in real estate, in quality of product, in culture. Culture is very important. You cannot replicate it. The Deepak Parekh has spent a lot of time on that subject, by the way. You can make your own judgment. So these are all the different things I would look for. But yeah, in terms of brand new startups, some will be successful, some not, and maybe the thing to do is have a portfolio of some intelligent diversification while not betting your entire net worth.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think, Anil, we can move to next topic, and then there could be again question answers on both the topics.
Right. Now I'll be talking about the extraordinary benefits of a plant-based vegan lifestyle, especially in these COVID times. Since COVID is foremost in our minds on a daily basis, let me start with what your immediate benefits can be. Then I'll point out general, medium, and long-term benefits. If one has a whole-based plant food diet, that is plant-based 100%, and even on the healthy side, what happens is it produces a lot of antibodies. It is associated with them, to use the right words. That's another word for immunity. If you have animal products, it creates associated with infectivity or antigens. This has been pointed out by several people, and there is this author called Colin Campbell who wrote the book China Study, which Bill Clinton read, became essentially a vegan, reversed his weight and heart disease. He has a new book, Future of Nutrition, and there's a chapter titled, Can Changing Your Diet Defeat COVID? So, and he points out, and this is just one of the thoughts with many other authors too, that the effect is very quick in as little as a few days. So even if one is non-vegetarian, you switch it, you can benefit. Even if you have mild COVID and you're at home, you can start doing it, it'll benefit. If you're in ICU, it may be a bit too late. And interestingly, he has pointed out that even a little animal product can disrupt the balance. There have been studies done that switching from animal to plant food reversed some health issues like cancers, and switching back recreated it. It was almost like a switch. So this is very, very powerful, and this is something one can do right now. So that's the main thing. The other very important thing is, while health is very complex, and each of you know that better than me also, having said that, statistically and likely, if you have a whole board plant food diet, you're less likely to be overweight, less likely to have comorbidities, heart issues, diabetes, cancer. Diabetes type 2 is actually fully reversible with a plant-based diet, as an example. And just yesterday, I was hearing a session by Neil Bernard, a very solid professional who is head of Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in Washington, D.C., had several thousand doctor members. And he pointed out that that even if you have had a vaccine, there are breakthroughs, and the breakthroughs are more likely in people who have comorbidities. So whether you have a vaccine or not, having a whole-based plant food diet helps. By the way, Campbell points out separately that a whole-based plant food diet may be actually more powerful than at times than even vaccines, because vaccines can have different efficacies, unknown long-term effects, virus mutations. I don't think anybody knows with 100% certainty everything about the COVID virus. It's like a googly, but nevertheless, these are being stated with high degree of confidence. So this is something you can do just now. It's very, very, very powerful. I wanted to highlight that. The other thing is, a question was asked to me recently, what about vegetarian versus vegan? There's actually a logarithmic difference between vegan and vegetarian. While philosophically they're in the same camp, you see the milk increases the production of mucus, and this COVID virus has it likes the lungs. So that's not going to help you. And also on a separate note, unrelated to COVID directly, human beings are the only species that have milk after weaning years. So when your mother stops making milk when you reach age 2 and your teeth come out, nature says you don't need to triple your weight anymore. Yet we keep having milk, and that too of another species. Even the cow doesn't have milk. Calf does. And the cow is designed, the cow's milk is perfect for cows. It's designed to triple a weight of an animal much larger than you. So it has a lot more fat and cholesterol. So that's a separate issue. I, by the way, was a non-vegetarian till 88, became vegetarian, then 2001 became a vegan. While I became vegan 13 years after I became vegetarian, the dramatic improvement in my health came then, even though I was much older. And more importantly, forget all the books, forget all theories. Sitting the organizer of this event is Mr. Chandak, who became vegan from vegetarian. And maybe, Mr. Chandak, you can share 2 or 3 lines about your experience.
Yeah, I became vegan after getting in touch with you in 2010. So from 2011 to 2018, I was almost 90% vegan. But then I found this 10% window creates a lot of problem. And I attended Dr. Nandita Shah's program of Saran on your recommendation for 3 weeks and got thoroughly impressed that 100% is required. And for last 3 years plus, I have immensely benefited out of that. I have stopped taking hypertension medicine, and my creatinine was 2.08. It has come down to almost 1.3 without any medication. And it has helped me on all the fronts. So this is my experience of becoming 100% vegan. And I don't find any challenge to follow this, whether at home or in travel or in India, any city, or outside India. I got my prescribed diet chart, and then I just forward this or give to people who organize in hotels or say in somebody's home, and it helps tremendously. So that's my experience.
Yes, the other thing I want to point out is in these comorbidities, interestingly, Neil Bernard, the head of Physician Committee of Responsible Medicine, pointed out that besides diabetes, cancer, heart attack, just fat and waistline was a key measure of getting infected and getting breakthroughs even after vaccines. So because more fat is associated with less immunity. So that's important to try to reduce if one can, which is more easy and natural with a vegan diet, because you don't have to restrict your eating. The other thing, of course, is Physicians Committee of Responsible Medicine. They have, from a scientific viewpoint, highlighted to various public authorities and government officials, and have succeeded in having no animals cruelly tested or used in many educations, lobbying for animal ingredients against vaccines. The COVID, most of them don't, but they're against animal testing too. It's not just ethical. It is not just the suffering of animals, which is horrible, but they point out that animal bodies are very different than ours. So what you gain from there is sometimes misleading. And now with technology and computer simulation and test tube molecules, you can do much better. So that's the important thing. There are people who are very much against animal testing also. There's no point killing somebody to try to further your own life. However, the other thing which is which I think is critical, which is missing from 99% of the discussions at global health officials, government officials, and I think that should be encouraged to the extent we can individually, is this goes back to one of Munger's phrases: if you have a hammer, all problems look like nails. So all the focus is on medical preparedness, testing, vaccines, having more infrastructure, but very little is talked about eliminating the root cause. There could be another pandemic. It's bound to happen. Maybe the next one is much worse. We don't know. 1918 killed about 50 million people and infected 1/3 of the world's population, by the way, including 15 million or so in India. And while animal eating is complex, and there's habit, and there's also environmental, economic, and habit issues involved. In terms of pandemics, animal eating is maybe 75-80% of the cause, and it's not just wet markets. There is factory farming which causes to it. There's also wild animals. So to try to get medicines and better prepared and vaccine, that to me is like preparing faster and faster missiles and nuclear bombs and laser technologies and satellites to eliminate the enemy, while not trying to address the root cause and have peace at a fundamental level, more like Gandhi type. But so that I think really needs to be highlighted, but unfortunately is generally not. So now I'll go back to some general things. In 1931, Mahatma Gandhi gave a speech in London, The Moral Basis of Vegetarianism. In fact, one thing we all know is he was always very honest. So he said, a lot of people talk about health, and they are vegetarians, he knows, who eat too much cheese. They may not necessarily be more healthy than non-vegetarians. So the only reason man can become and women can become more evolved is have a moral basis, a spiritual angle. He would not even take medicines if they had animal ingredients. One of his sons had a serious typhoid, pneumonia, and delirium at the same time. And the doctor said he needs chicken soup and eggs, otherwise he will die. And the family as a whole, because the son was 14 years old, decided they will not have it, even if it meant death. And he survived and turned out to be the healthiest of his children. So Gandhiji points out, whether one says it was coincidence, luck, or faith, and he believes it was God. But he says, doctors don't have everything in hand; they don't know everything. So one has to keep that moral basis in the mind. That to me is the predominant reason for myself, at least. And in my case, there was very importantly, I started with the moral basis, but then I found harmony in everything. My health improved dramatically. The kinds of people I meet is different. There's a big environmental impact. Last few days, there was a UN report. It highlighted that meat consumption is one of the leading causes of this greenhouse impacts and should be reduced. They've been saying this for a long time, but it was highlighted further. And then I have made presentations on the impact on mind and war and peace. This is also important. Our first president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was the only president elected thrice, he said that at that time, hydrogen bomb had just been tested. So he said the only way to escape the nuclear and hydrogen bomb is to have more and more cultivations for understanding each other's viewpoint and not hurting each other, even in so-called extreme situations. And he says it's just another word for vegetarianism. Albert Schweitzer, who won the Nobel Prize in early 1950s, shortly after the first atomic bomb was exploded, by the way, it was August 6th in Hiroshima, August 9th in Nagasaki, said that to prevent these kinds of catastrophes, the talk about peace and not hurting others has to extend beyond humans, because when you expand it to animals also, then it improves the way you even deal with humans. Now, it's not a one-for-one scientific cause and effect, but increases the chances. So you have to just keep promoting it. It becomes a habit, and then you're more thing. Even between nations, people just talk about, countries just talk about negotiations and borders and things. Maybe if they promoted peace in a global way through vegetarianism or veganism better, they will become more peaceful automatically. And now I know this is a little bit not practical immediately, but nevertheless, one has to have a goal that works against. I wanted to highlight another aspect, which is that vegetarianism and veganism can actually promote broader democratic thinking in a different way. If you look at history, 4 of first US president had slaves, and we had Barack Obama as president twice. Women could not vote in India and US up until just 6, 7, 8 decades back. And now it's inconceivable. So as you broaden your boundaries, the rest of the populations also get helped out. They benefit. So similarly, if you expand this concept of inclusiveness and compassion for people who think differently, different races, different sexual orientations, different genders, animals, you're going to be more peaceful yourself. You're going to be ultimately benefiting yourself. And one must keep that in mind in many, many cases. And it's not possible to be 100% perfect, but nevertheless, one can try. Like people ask me, what about extreme situations? What about germs? Well, germs are very different than 5-legged, 5-sense animals. And even if one does something in extreme situation, doesn't mean one needs to do it in normal circumstances. Plants respond to light. They don't have the 5 senses. Take the case of even extreme terrorism. When in Bombay, they broke into the hotels, Indian government had to deploy our soldiers. That is nevertheless, whether whatever happened there, even though Mahatma Gandhi says this, that war is just legalized mass murder, nevertheless, that doesn't mean that if you had to have the terrorists killed, next day you kill your neighbor, well, they're both human beings, so what's the difference? So when people talk, hey, we kill germs, so why not cows and pigs? It's very, very different situations. The other thing I want to highlight is it's a very difficult subject because I genuinely believe there's nobody superior or inferior. We all have different positive and to be improved qualities. This is not a vegetarianism, and veganism is not an end for all. There are vegans who I know have some aspects I don't like, and non-vegetarians who have some extraordinary good qualities which I would love to have, which I don't have. Hans Peter Dürr, who won something known as the Alternative Nobel Prize in Physics, he wrote a paper, Matter is Not Matter. It's very interesting. He said, countries have wars because they say a circle is blue, another country says red. Well, circle is a circle, it's not red or blue. So we don't know absolutely what's right or wrong, but the thinking I follow is, if I would not want to be hurt, then I shouldn't hurt others. So I think these are some of the key points. Now I just wanted to go back a little bit on the health side, because that's more imminent. While I talked in terms of the COVID likeness, the thing to do is, some of most interesting is, the human body has an intestine length where it's very similar to vegetarian animals. It's 12 to 14 times the body length, because the food needs to digest slowly. And lions and others have 1 to 2 times. So the food needs to come out quickly, otherwise it rots. And that's why cancer of the colon is more common in meat-eating countries. There is I mentioned diabetes. By the way, before I forget, there's an organization called Sharan in India, headed by Nandita Shah. This is just one of the books. They have programs in all cities, and you can use it locally, and you can attend some seminars or even seek some help, and you'll get more information, because the more information you have, the more likely you're able to do something. The other thing is, there are many factors also where we are just very similar to herbivores. For example, our jaws move side to side. We grind, we don't chew. Water is sipped rather than licked. So the joke is, if somebody, I make it up, if somebody tell me they're meant to be non-vegetarians, then I ask them if they sip or lick the water, and then we laugh. So our tongue is alkaline, not acidic. Now, of course, they are omnivores, but our body is much closer to herbivores. So now here's 2 very interesting facts. This is just scientific fact. This is not even a view. You may be surprised. No animal food, meat, fish, eggs, or milk, has fiber. Zero fiber, zero. No plant product, including avocados, including cashew nuts, have cholesterol. You may be surprised. The reason is cholesterol is made in the liver of an animal, and these cashews and avocados don't have liver. Now you won't forget it. Yes, they have saturated fat, and that's in a moderate, good quantity, which is needed. So I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg as to what Mr. Chandak is also very knowledgeable. I am at the same time quite happy that there has been, in the last few years, veganism more and more common places. There's in Manhattan, near where I live, there's maybe 70, 80 vegan restaurants, 100%, just like there should Shakahari in India. Also very impressively, there's a movie called Game Changers. You can see it at your convenience. It highlights that many of the world's #1 athletes, not even 2, are vegan, whether it's the tennis Djokovic or even weightlifters. That's it, even weightlifters. That's right, I'm repeating. Runners, even in the recent Olympics. And some of the science is the vegan food stays less inside, produces less byproducts, therefore your body uses more efficiently. So it's no longer just a side interesting thing. It's coming into the mainstream. And two other common questions that are asked of me is, what about protein? Now, protein is made from amino acids. All plants have 3 to 7%, and that's more than enough. Where do you think the world's strongest animals, elephants, giraffes, horses, get their protein from? It's from amino acids in the plants they eat. The other thing is about calcium. I say, oh, so calcium, you mean osteoporosis. Interestingly, the highest osteoporosis in the world is in USA, Scandinavia, and India, which are the largest milk consuming countries. The reason is, yes, you get calcium from the cow's milk, but it also is acidic. All animal foods have acid bias. All plant foods are alkaline. So your body says, hey, this acid is a little foreign, so I need to neutralize it. So what it does is it actually leaches out calcium from your bones to neutralize that acid in the milk. And there's a net deficit comes out of your urine. So you end up actually being more deficit. So it is complex. So nature has designed us perfectly, you know. So I just wanted to give some more background as to the health side. And it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if you can see this this cartoon, but there's a doctor telling a patient that we are going to, you have a heart problem, we're going to do a bypass surgery, we're going to stitch up your veins and arteries, cost you $100,000 and you'll be out for a few months. He says, or you can take a vegan diet. And the patient says, vegan diet? Wow, that's too extreme. So anyway, you get the idea. So I think I will go back to question and answers on this subject now.
Thank you, Anil. Are there any sources of omega-3 in vegan food products?
Yes, that's a very important question. But yeah, by the way, I mean, I want to, before I answer that question directly, you know, veganism doesn't mean you become automatically healthy. I could be a vegan, have a lot of potato chips and smoke a lot. I won't be healthy, and some non-vegetarian maybe net more healthy. So it is complex. It's not as if it's automatically you become. So omega-3 and DHA, etc., you know, they are needed for brain functions and nerves and other things, very important. And the best sources are walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds. And so you must have that. In fact, you know, as one ages past 16 to 70 and 80s, some of the brain functions decline, whether it's Alzheimer's or memory, especially in the 80s. And whether you're vegan or not, you should have these sources. Otherwise, you're going to suffer. They're also, it's easy to mix them up also in some smoothies or just have it directly. But so it's just keep that in mind. Yes.
Thank you.
Chirag wanted to ask a question. He's raised a hand.
Yeah, Chirag, go ahead.
Unable to unmute. Okay, yeah. Hi. Mr. Narang, thank you so much for this wonderful talk. I think I was more interested in the vegan part of the conversation than the investing part, but I'd like to converge both of them and ask you a question. You know, over the last, I mean, I would say 5-6 years, veganism has become a pretty active trend in at least the urban population in the country. And there are a lot of new brands that have emerged. In fact, I have been lucky to participate in one such vegan brand which makes vegan dairy, paneer, you know, meat, mayonnaise, a bunch of these products. And we've also sort of we've also tied up with a New York-based fund to launch their plant-based protein fund in India, an alternative protein fund in India. So my question is, of course, America is far ahead in this space, and you've got the likes of Beyond Meat and Just and all of these guys. Beyond Meat is of course IPO'd. Just is planning to do an IPO. How do you see, how can we as Indians or participate in this investing opportunity within the plant-based ecosystem as well, while supporting it financially together with making some return in the meanwhile as well?
Yes, US has been in the forefront with many new technology and new investing things. In India also, even though it's a much lower level, every few months I see more and more businesses and some scalable ones too. So that is something we can also talk offline later. So I'm involved with some of those initiatives. One is direct investing. The other is, of course, just like the ESG fund, environmental social governance, one can have funds that promotes a vegan lifestyle. They don't invest, for example, in meat companies just to promote that concept. It's a negative screen. But in terms of direct investing, it may be better to have a more detailed discussion offline. In terms of opportunities in India, in the US, what is very amazing is every 2-3 weeks, I see more and more inroads with those kinds of companies. And it's not just vegans who are consuming it, it's also non-vegetarians who are having more and more of these. So the opportunity scale is very high. For example, in the US, in most houses, not all, they may be non-vegetarian, but they would many times have soy milk, either for their own consumptions or for the guests. The 70-80 vegan restaurants I mentioned in Manhattan, I think 80% of the clients are not strict vegans. So the scope is a lot. It's not restricted to just vegans. And I think if you go out 10 years, one may be surprised. As to how big these businesses could become. It's the upside many times people can't visualize. So
no, thank you so much for this. I'll probably love to chat with you offline and discuss with you about this.
We have two questions, one from Rachna Prasad and one from Pulkit Bandari. So Rachna, can you ask directly? Or Pulkit, can you go ahead?
I think Chandriji, better you ask the question.
Okay.
Better.
So Pulkit says, can being vegan for most days fine, while be vegetarian if traveling or for convenience sake at times, especially with regard to kids?
Yeah, that's a very important, good, practical question. And I've evolved my thinking. I think everything helps. There's shades of gray. Need not be black and white. Having said that, so you can adopt whatever. Everything will help. Having said that, in some cases, including mine, at least for myself, I found that a quantum change was easier. Then there's no more decision. It's like they're saying, if there's incremental change, it's too easily resisted. So once your mind is made up, you just don't think about it. But you can have shades of gray, and especially with people around you, and everything will help. In any case, nothing's going to change overnight. So even you look at myself, I was non-vegetarian, vegetarian, vegan, within vegan also different shades of.
So we have another question from Rachna Prasad. What do you think about technology stocks? According to Buffett, we should understand the business, but nowadays all businesses are tech-driven.
Yeah, I think Yeah, to the extent some technology companies have become more predictable, almost like consumer companies like Apple or Infosys, they are more readily understandable and predictable and more investable in terms of predictability. However, there will be disruptors and it's hard to figure out which. And you can use your own judgment and allocate appropriately as long as you can bear that risk and willingness to hang on if you are convinced about it. But it's I don't have a black and white answer there. It is happening and businesses are being impacted, but you can see which businesses are maybe adopting it to their advantage. That's another factor. In fact, forget about technology per se. At the last annual meeting in early May, in which Buffett flew down to Los Angeles to be with Munger, so they appeared jointly in front of a TV camera. I think one of the very few one of the slides he showed was he said, before I show it, I'm going to show you the top I think it was 25 companies or so in the world 30 years back. And then he said, before I show you the next slide, make a guess how many are still in the top 30. There were people sitting with me. Somebody said 5%, somebody said 1%. The answer was actually zero. And not all of them had gone out of business. Some had. So this was even before the huge technology shift. So one has to always adapt and think progressively and try to think. There's the one reason Munger and Buffett is quite amazing. 60 years, no major mistakes. For the first 25 years till 2000, they grew at 25, then index type, although this year they're beating the index despite the size because the value is coming out. The reason is they keep thinking and evolving and adapting. So one has to do that, and you can say, when you buy a share of Berkshire, 20% of money is going towards Apple. So they have adopted technology in some way. So maybe you look for that, and then of course look out for new opportunities yourself. And it's not easy to figure out which ones. It's difficult to answer.
Yeah, thank you. Pawanji, can you unmute Pulkit Bhandari? He wants to ask one more question, and also Harshad Bhai.
No, sir, I'm good. I got my answer.
Okay. Harshad Bhai, you can unmute Pawanji and he can ask one question.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, Anilji. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Would you kindly expand on how veganism is not only related and restricted to the food habits, and how it is beneficial and how it has to be practiced by thought, word, and deed, meaning harmless, egoless, and truthful way of life, and ultimately how it helps all of us for the main purpose of life is to be happy, healthy, blissful. So can you expand on that, please?
This is a very central key point. I brought it out in a different context, saying there's a totality. That is, I found that you do it. In my case, I did it for moral reasons. Then the health, environment, mind all help. Some people start with health, then they find out that the moral reason also become important. So there is some harmony in nature which you are able to bring out. And what Harshad is saying is very important. Harshad himself became a vegan long before I did. I think he can better explain what he went through and what he has felt than I can, because it's a very insightful. Harshad, may I ask, I'm going to flip the question back to you. Maybe you can explain your experience.
Yeah, I can expand it. Me and my wife, we are vegan for almost 31 years. And people become vegan for many various aspects of the life and virtues. Basically, every human being wants to be happy, healthy, blissful in every aspect of the life. Investment is one part, health is another part, environment is third part, but peace of mind and happiness and successfulness is everybody's desire. And if you consider we are all children of God, God, when we got birth, must have blessed us that we should be always happy, healthy, blissful, and peace, love, and joy. But why we are all unhappy always, and guilt and sorry and fearful about everything? And that is all because of the karma. And food is the first part and a very important part, because food starts everything. It's a catalyst to start your vegan journey. And not only you will be benefited healthy, but you will be benefited financially, economically, family life, otherwise also. So our personal experience is that being vegan by thought, word, and deed, meaning do not hurt anybody by saying something, doing something, or thinking something, helps you tremendously personally. And that is how we have been benefited. I am a survivor of 3 cancers, 1 stroke, 1 bankruptcy. And we are reasonably very happy in life, physically, mentally, spiritually, and financially. So that's what my experience is all about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harshadji, for bringing it up. And the interesting thing Harshad mentioned is even financially he was helped. And I think he's talking somewhere the universe helped him out because he was helping the animals. So it's interesting.
Yeah, Dipen, you can ask the question you wanted to ask. Pawanji, can you unmute Dipen set?
Dipen can unmute himself. Huh?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Yeah, please.
Thanks for the opportunity. This is very insightful, Mr. Narang. The question I have for you is not meant to be a funny question. It's actually dead serious, though it might seem a little funny when I ask you, but that's not the intent. And there's a whole lot of contradictory views and information on the internet about it. Related to having a better quality diet and therefore gradually moving towards vegetarianism and then veganism. How about people tell us that a little bit of moderate consumption of alcohol is actually good in the long run for human life? Is that, what is your experience or understanding or information or wisdom that you have on this matter?
Yeah, it is actually often asked questions. Let me give you an answer from 3 or 4 different dimensions. One is these 70, 80 vegan restaurants I mentioned in Manhattan or globally, almost all of them serve alcohol. So it's not against veganism. The higher quality restaurants, if they are strict, they will serve pure vegan wines and beers. What that means is, while the wines and beers do not have animal products in the end, some wines in the processing, not in the end product, go through fish bones or other things. So there, that aspect is pure. Now, in terms of alcohol consumption and health, one plant-based, very reputable doctor, he has pointed out that if one is unhealthy, interestingly, little alcohol in some cases, and I can provide the literature to you offline, may be helpful. But if you're already super healthy or having a whole-based plant food diet, then alcohol is a negative. So it's interesting. And then on a personal basis, nothing to do with veganism, I'm a teetotaler. And the best way to describe it is, once I heard some lecture, and the lecturer who was against alcohol said, "Jo maza jeene mein hai, wo peene mein nahi." Of course, my alcohol drinking friends say, "Jo maza peene mein, wo jeene mein nahi," but you can take your pick. But the reason I'm not is one of my very good family friends, Pradeep Narayan, and his father Prakash Narayan was chairman of Railways Board, and he chaired 2 of my talks on veganism, by the way, the Indian International Center and Habitat in Delhi a few years back. He points out that because most people in society that maybe you and I know have alcohol in moderate quantities it promotes the concept that it's okay. However, when society as a whole has it, some people fall badly, not only through cracks, but in wide gaps. 50% of deaths, car accidents in the US are still alcohol related. Poor people spend their money on alcohol. Some others, family members have issues. They drink too much. So it's very hard to draw the line. So by not having it, you're not promoting it in society in general. So this is, it's you can pick whatever you liked out of those 3 or 4 things, but it's a good, very relevant question. Yeah.
Okay, so thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, any other question?
Yeah, let me in fact, interestingly, in a different way, tie the vegan and nuclear war and even Buffett's meeting. I actually did ask at the annual meeting, somehow I won some lottery and one of the few people who could ask the question. So I did ask Warren that, since he has, by the way, spoken a lot against the dangers of nuclear, cyber, biological wars, and he doesn't see an easy solution. He thinks just because it's not happened doesn't mean the probability has gone down. Human beings are very poor at figuring out odds of remote events and how to handle them. But he doesn't know what to do about it, so he's not allocated too much money to that, but he has a little bit. So I pointed out that, maybe a vegan lifestyle, and Albert Schweitzer quote, I mentioned the Nobel Prize winner who said you have to treat animals well too to have peace among humans. So he was at least took my question and we followed up, and he introduced me to some other people in his empire who are in businesses that are not entirely vegan. But so there is a relation indirectly between what he thinks. So what I was trying to say is, Buffett and Munger think very broadly about everything in life. It's not just investing, it's not just broad saying. They also thought about nuclear and other wars. And I think there's a linkage between how we treat animals there too. This is my perspective.
Yeah, Pranay, you want to ask a question? Pranay, you have to unmute.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. It's been very great to hear you. If you could share the names of few books which probably helped you move towards veganism, and also what you found interesting in the investing circle, which we can benefit from.
Right. So there's several books. Here's one excellent one, World Peace Diet. This is actually on the topic I was just speaking, by Will Tuttle, PhD. He's a PhD from Berkeley, now in his late 60s, super healthy, no medicine for 40, 50 years. He knows all the science, the ethics, but he's very, very spiritual also at the same time, unusual combination. So this book is very good. If you go to the website, even worldpeacediet.com or Will Tuttle, you'll find a lot of material. It covers all the aspects that I mentioned. Neil Bernard, who I mentioned, the head of Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, he has several books, but this is one of the better ones, or at least the more relevant to some people. I know, Foods That Fight Pain. The title is misleading. It actually is a broader topic. There's Eat to Live by Joel Fuhrman. Interestingly, he's not a pure vegan, but scientifically he says a plant-based diet or nutrient eating in a healthy way is better. So in a strange way, science is pointing the same thing I'm doing for other reasons. Here's another book, What a Fish Knows. A lot of people say, hey, what about fish? Isn't that a jal tori? And this author points out that they also have feelings. They group, they massage their backs. They're just like animals. And fish, of course, has cholesterol and no fiber, and also mercury and other things. There is I'm showing this again just because this is local. Sharon, you can Google and find some local sources in India, Bombay, Delhi. You're finding more and more things. so I think, yeah, maybe I have a lot of other, there's on a philosophical other basis, there is somebody I know very well, a family friend, Satya Prakash Narayan. He's now 96, won a lot of awards from Shankar Dayal Sharma, ex-president of India, on Gita for the 21st century. He's written a lot of books on practical Vedanta and modern issues. His latest book is Practical Vedanta and Veganism. He thinks that whatever our rishis and sages and people like Aurobindo and Gandhi they did, that was fantastic, and we have to keep evolving. And veganism is the next big wave. So that's more on a philosophical basis. Practical Vedanta and Veganism. Satya Prakash Narayan, Agarwal. You can Google his name. Now, in terms of investing, I showed you 2 books, but there's actually 5 or 6 other dozen books, but actually this is one of the recent ones. It's a very thick one. Aaron Mead, but if you buy the book or hear it on audible.com like I did, the last 2 chapters are particularly interesting. They talk about the synergies among the Berkshire conglomerate and how even after Buffett and Munger are not heading Berkshire, Berkshire may still be fine. Or here, I wanted to point out interesting thing, talking about their extraordinary, I'll use the word infinite and spiritual, if you will, perspective. Let me give you one true story, which is not mentioned in any paper because I just observed it on my own. 7-8 years back, I happened to be watching CNBC and Buffett appeared. So I immediately, of course, dropped everything and saw what he was saying. And this is when he had acquired this railroad company, BNSF. And the interviewer asked him, is it really going to be a great investment? And you're already 80 plus. And he said, well, you just wait, it'll be fine. And then he said, without joking, and he's very witty all the time, by the way, any conversation, he said, besides 100 to 200 year investment. So that's the perspective he had. So, there's actually on Buffett and Munger, there's dozens and dozens of books. There's maybe offline, I can give you more information.
Maybe you can send the names and we can circulate.
Yeah. That will be very helpful, sir.
I think that would be useful. And
let me
wanted to see the book which you saw last.
I'm sorry, you want to see that again?
Yes, he wants to see that.
Yeah, it's a very thick book. It's a little technical, but the last 2 chapters are particularly, I thought, interesting. Actually, I might as well just spend 1 minute on I know I flashed this book briefly, but this is a little relevant because what happened is, Chow En-lai, when I was young, he was the premier of China, so he got cancer. So he had a massive survey among Chinese as to what they eat and what health issues they get. And it turned out that in rural China's, where they were not strict vegans, but had very little animal products, mostly whole food, plant-based, the heart attack cancer rates were significantly lower than other areas of China where they ate normal amounts of meat and fish like the West. So the heart attack, cancer, diabetes rates in rural China in that very extraordinary best epistemological survey apparently was not 50%, not 20, not 5. It was close to zero, almost negligible. It was such a startling find. So then he went into the reasons, and Oxford and Cornell were involved, and he found out that based on his research that it's the animal products which cause a lot of these problems. And it is interestingly the excess of protein which was causing it, especially animal based, Okay.
Yeah. So thank you, Anil, for your giving an in-depth analysis of both the topics. And we had special guests like Arsad Bhai and Deepak Parekh today, and also a lot of ladies from Millennium Memes organization who visited Warren Buffett's AGM in the past through Anil Narang. And Anil has fund in USA, so anyone of our interested to talk to him separately, we can provide the details. And can I ask Ishita and Chirag to propose hearty vote of thanks to all the guests, and Anil Narang or Deepak Parekh and Millennium Memes and Arshad Bhai.
Absolutely. I'll start with Anil ji. Anil ji, thank you so much. This was a very enlightening talk on two very vast and very diverse subjects. Also, I would like to mention my own personal journey with veganism. I've been a vegan for 1/4 of last year, speaking in financial language. And I'm a wannabe vegan now. I try to follow the 90% vegan rule. And a lot of my family members are very strict vegans. So veganism is always definitely where my northern star is veganism. So thank you so much for elaborately discussing and answering our questions on it. And always glad to know more about what Warren Buffett does and his style, and obviously Mr. Munger's as well. So thank you so much for walking us through that as well. Would also like to thank, I think Mr. Parekh is no longer on the call. Chandakji.
Yeah, he left a little bit back, but then you can thank him.
So thank you so much, Harshad ji, for attending. Glad to know that about your success stories with veganism. I think when you put things in perspective like that, and if you have such real life examples, like Narang ji also said that diabetes type 2 is very easily cured on a plant-based diet. I think stuff like that is unfathomable. So thank you so much. And thank you so much, Chandak ji.
And you can also thank Millennium Memes.
Millennium Memes, absolutely. Thank you so much for attending. I think I was just wondering, how did our group size increase so rapidly? Maybe we can have you with us for more sessions. And thank you so much, Chandak ji. This was a great refresher thing from our daily dose of investing content.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anil.
Thank you, Mr. Chandak. Investors Group, Millennium Memes, Deepak Parekh. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
With this, we are closing today's session. Thank you, everyone.